So a couple of weeks ago, I did a video on the hottest watches of 2024. And again in the comments, I got thrown at me the same question. It's which one of these watches or which watches of this list would you actually buy? And it kind of got the cogs turning because just because a watch is super sexy and I really like it doesn't necessarily mean that I would convert to buy it. So I thought I'd do a video on the watches of 2024 that are super sexy that I would actually buy. And this time I won't use a timer because I don't think people... That went down like a lead balloon, to be honest. Welcome back to the Chisholm Hunter channel. My name is Harrison, as always. And 2024 has been a banging release for watches, even when we cast our mind as far back to Watches and Wonders. And it's funny, all the releases from Watches and Wonders, everyone seems to forget about extremely quickly. But they are banging releases. Before we start this video, if you could do me a huge favor and hit that subscribe button to help us reach our goal of 75,000 subscribers and our next giveaway, which is coming up like a steam train, I would really appreciate it. Honestly, guys, it means the world, so thank you for the support. Let's kick off with a brand that you guys will definitely be surprised at because it's not your classic Speedmaster white dial or Tudor Black Bay monochrome. This is the Panerai Submersible Luna Rosa. This thing with the white dial, the red touches, this is so damn sexy. This watch comes in at 42mm and comes in full stainless steel. And typically Panerai watches, in my opinion, look better when they're bigger. They're one of the very few brands that actually pull off being bigger because it's kind of just encoded in their DNA. It has a ceramic anti-clockwise rotating bezel that contrasts wonderfully to that white dial. And then when we move into the white dial, it has this beautiful kind of monochrome look with that red second hand just popping out the color that little bit more and drawing the eye further in. Everything about this dial is extremely easy to read. It's extremely blocky. It's extremely Instagrammable. It's very clean. The date window at the 3 o'clock and the small seconds at the left-hand side at the 9 o'clock makes this dial very symmetrical. It of course has superluminova filling those hour markers and hands, and also has this is the pinnacle feature to me. It has that safety latch on the right-hand side, something that has become so iconic to Panerai, and the way that it's engineered is just phenomenal. Honestly, when I first got this in my hands at Watches and Wonders 2024, I kind of looked at the safety latch and thought, that's a problem. That would be a bit flimsy, but it's honestly not. It's engineering to the max. It feels rugged. It feels tough. It just feels like a Panerai. The movement in this model is the automatic mechanical P.900 caliber, and this caliber is 4.2mm thick, has 23 jewels, beats at 28,800 VPH, has anti-shock properties, and has a power reserve of 3 days. Now, it does have a screw-down case back, and yes, potentially that's the only thing that I would want to change on this watch because I do like seeing into the kind of mechanics of my watch. But the history of this watch does go back to the military, it does go back to the Italian Navy, so I get it. And just to finalize, the strap on this watch is kind of this dark gray color with this red stripe down it. And normally when I get a watch, the first thing I want to change is the strap. There's always something that I can tweak on the strap, especially when it's not a bracelet and it's a NATO or a rubber. But I don't think I'd change this. I think it honestly is almost perfect just the way it is. Now, this watch does come in at £9,500, so it's by no means, way, shape, or form cheap, and it's definitely not something that I would get soon or within the next 2 years, because I'll definitely not be able to afford it. But this is definitely one that would convert me. This is definitely one that I would buy. The next watch we're going to talk about is one that is very special to me for one specific reason, and it's because my brother has one, and he gave it to me for the biggest podcast that I've done to date on the Into the Mind show, which is my personal podcast. This is the Breitling Chronomat GMT 40 coming in this beautiful light blue color. And let me tell you a personal story before we get into the specs of the watch. So I've always been a rugby fan. I've been a rugby fan since I was a little kid. I was never very good at it, but I was always a fan. And when I began the Into the Mind podcast, when I started interviewing people and having conversations with people, I wanted to speak to the rugby guys because I had this kind of infatuation. I was a fan, if you will. And one of the guys that I wanted to speak to most was called Duhan van der Merwe. Now, Duhan van der Merwe was actually getting a Breitling from Chisholm Hunter, and he started speaking to me. So we invited him on the podcast to give him the Breitling watch. And for the podcast, my brother actually lent me his Breitling watch. And I think it's because he could kind of see that I was getting a bit more nervous and he maybe just wanted to support, and he knew that that would mean a lot to me. So yeah, this has personal ties to me, But to top that off, it's also just a really sexy looking watch. So let's get into the specs. This watch comes in at 40 millimeters in diameter. So it wears perfectly, or it weared perfectly, or it wore perfectly? Wore is the right terminology. It wore perfectly on my 6.5 inch wrists. It has a case thickness of 11.70 millimeters in thickness, but Breitling's website at the moment weirdly says that it has a thickness of 117 millimeters, which is just definitely not right. The lug to lug comes in at 47.4 millimeters, and the lug width comes in at 20 millimeters. The case material is in stainless steel and platinum, and it's water resistant to 200 meters. It has a unidirectional rotating bezel, and it also has the Breitling caliber 32 movement, which is a self-winding mechanical movement with a second time zone because it's a GMT model, and it has a power reserve of 42 hours, and it peaks at a frequency of 28,800 VPH. I just love the fact that on this watch they've not opted for a ceramic bezel. I think that ceramic bezels are kind of taking over, but when you look at vintage watches like the Omega Great White, which I used to actually have, they look so sexy because they have that finishing on the bezel which reflects the light in a way that ceramic just never will. And I think that's just why I love them. It looks more vintage, it looks more long lasting, and although it will scratch probably a little bit more, it looks sexier in the interim. To top that off, it has a date window at the 6 o'clock mark, and also remember that it is a GMT model reading multiple time zones at the one time. And for me personally, when I travel, that's something that I don't have yet that I should probably have because my lifestyle is very travel centric. So yeah, I should probably get a GMT. And if I was to get a GMT, it would either be this or the next watch we're going to talk about. But before we talk about that next watch, we need to talk about the price. This comes in at £6,650. So it's a big step down from the Luna Rosa, the Panerai Luna Rosa, but it is still quite expensive. The next GMT model that I'm going to talk about that I would actually buy, not that I just think is sexy, is one that you're going to be sick of me talking about. And I do apologize, but you just can't deny the brilliance of this watch. This is the Longines Hydra Conquest GMT. Specifically, it's the 41 millimeter variant, not the 43, and you do get a ton of different colors. Now, the one that I would opt for personally is the black dial, and you'll see a theme as we go through these watches. I'm picking watches that I think would last through the ages. Not something that I think is cool now and that I'll kind of get bored of in a year or two. I'm picking watches that have more of a long-term reach, I would say. Now, when looking at the Hydra Conquest GMT, you do have a blue dial, a brown dial, a black dial, and also a green dial. So you have a couple of different variants, and also you have two different sizes, the 41 and the 43. Now, what got me about this watch to start with was the upgrades that Longines had given this from the previous Longines Hydra Conquest. I mean, the bezel was upgraded, the bracelet was upgraded, the clasp was upgraded. No longer do they have that little safety flap. They've totally gone away with that and opted for something so much more synchronized and brilliant and just simple. Everything about this watch is rocking. This watch comes in at 41 millimeters, 49.4 millimeters lug to lug, and 12.9 millimeters in thickness. It's water resistant to 300 meters, has sapphire crystal glass, and it also has the caliber L844 fully automatic movement with 72 hours of power, and that beats at a frequency of 25,200 VPH. Now, I love the splashes of orange on that black dial versus the black, and this watch just seems like something that would last through the ages, that would last through life. And the fact that I haven't got a Longines yet, but I preach about them all the time, and I'm such a big fan of the brand, that's partially the reason why I'm including them, because it's weird that I haven't got one yet in a strange kind of way. Now, this watch comes in at £2,750, so it is a lot more accessible, especially to me because I'm absolutely skint and I have no money at the moment. It would take me a year or two to save up for something like this, but it is definitely a lot more accessible to me. So I think value for money wise, Longines is up there with some of the best. And on that note, guys, what is on your wrist today? It's time for the Chisholm Hunter tradition, which of course is the wrist check. I currently have the Tudor Black Bay ETA on, more of a vintage version at the moment. And also I need to just, I need to apologize about the 2024 video where I was timing myself because a lot of people didn't like that. I thought it was just a bit of fun, but some people didn't like that at all. So I won't do that again. I might do something a bit different to spice things up, but that won't happen again, I promise. The next watch we're going to talk about is the Omega Speedmaster Sapphire Sandwich, or the Omega Moonwatch Professional, whatever you want to call it. And this is the white dial variant. And basically, it's the same as the black dial variant, but it's white. That's honestly pretty much it. I feel like this is a watch that everybody saw coming, but didn't expect at the same time. I mean, every time a watch brand bring out a black dial of something, the odds are years down the line that it will bring out a white eventually. I mean, we saw this in the Omega Speedmaster. They brought out the black, then they brought out some blues, and then they brought out the whites, and then they brought out the greens. So they kind of systematically work their way through the colors to make a big boom in the marketing material. I think what got us about this is the fact that it just took them so long to do it. This watch is going to be my next watch. I've said this in a couple of videos, but this is definitely the one of this list I will be getting first when I get the money and when I stop buying stupid stuff like that camera. This watch comes in at 42 millimeters, comes in at 13.2 millimeters in thickness, 47.5 millimeters lug to lug, and between those lugs you have about 20 millimeters. It's water resistant to 50 meters, has a product weight of 140 grams, which is a little bit heavier than the previous Sapphire Sandwich, and it has the Omega 3861 movement, which of course and Meta certified, has 50 hours of power, and of course is manual winding, keeping with that tradition of the Speedmaster. And I haven't got any manual winding watches in my collection at the moment, or do I? Apart from the khaki field that I actually sent back because it's broken and they're fixing it for me, I don't have any manual winding watches. And this would be that classic watch that I could hand down through the generations, that would never age, that would look timeless. And it's a Speedmaster. I think a lot of it in the industry comes down to the name at the end of the day. This watch comes in at £7,600. So yes, again, it's not cheap, but it's something that will last through the ages. And a Speedmaster has a huge amount of history behind it. It's just, I honestly think the Speedmaster is probably one of the most perfect watches in the industry. The next watch we're going to talk about is the Hamilton Khaki Field Murph, coming in at 38 millimeters, and it is the new white dial. This is the third iteration of the Murph watch, and the Murph as a family, if you want to call it that, is kind of becoming its own little family. I already said that, but you guys kind of get what I mean. It's kind of becoming like the Omega Seamaster Aquaterra line, or the Omega Seamaster 300 meter professional line, or the Omega Seamaster Planet Ocean line. It's kind of becoming a subgenre of the khaki field line because of the popularity. So firstly, they released the original Murph that was featured in the movie and had Eureka on the second hand. Then they released the black dial 38 millimeters on the leather strap, and now they've released the white dial on the leather strap. And they also released a black dial on the bracelet, but let's ignore that for now. The white dial doesn't have any secret codes on it. It doesn't have any Eureka text or any kind of throwbacks to the original that was featured in the movie, but it does share the same aesthetic, the same vibe, and for non-interstellar enthusiasts that just like watches, it's still a very sexy option. I feel like even if it wasn't featured in the Interstellar movie, it would still be just as popular as it is today, just because of the aesthetics of it. This watch comes in at 38 millimeters in diameter, so it is that little bit smaller, and it definitely fits those smaller wrists. It comes in at 11.1 millimeters in thickness and 44.7 millimeters lug to lug. It has sapphire crystal glass, and it has the Hamilton H10 movement, which is fully automatic, and it has 80 hours of power, and it also is water resistant to 100 meters. The khaki field Murph takes everything about the khaki field that we found sexy and puts it into a non-rugged looking case. This is definitely more dressy than it is outdoorsy, than it is sporty. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. I feel like this would be the watch that I would wear when I'm going into the office, or even when I'm in the studio, when I'm not exploring and going up the hills. But the only thing that I don't like about this watch, if I'm perfectly honest, is the leather strap. I would almost instantly switch this over to the NATO strap, if I'm perfectly honest. I just feel like, see a dark green or a black NATO strap, it would suit this aesthetic, this vibe so much nicer. And also leather straps just kind of sit in my bone a little bit weird. I'm not a fan of that. This watch comes in at £865, so if you are looking for something for Christmas, which is scary, but it's fast approaching, then this would be a brilliant watch for you. Hamilton are a banging brand with banging products that produce banger after banger after banger. The next watch that I would actually buy, that I've reviewed this year and that came out in 2024, is the Omega Aquaterra Black Lacquer Dial. This watch came in 3 different sizing options, but the one that I would specifically go for after having them on in the studio is the 38mm variant. And I feel like this Black Dial Aquaterra, sticking with the theme that we were talking about earlier, is something that everyone saw coming, that everybody knew Omega could do, but they seemed to just hold off that little bit. And then none of us expected it, but we all kind of knew it was coming. It was weird, if I'm totally honest. The thing is, this is a watch that's timeless. It's a watch that's clean. It's a watch that can live through the ages. And again, I hate to repeat myself, but I am sticking to that theme of stuff that is that little bit more timeless. If I'm spending a lot of money, I mean, this watch comes in at £6,200, I want to know that it's going to last through the ages. This watch comes in at 38 millimeters in diameter, 12.3 millimeters in thickness, 45.1 millimeters lug to lug. And between those lugs, you have a bit of a smaller gap than the previous watches we've talked about at 19 millimeters. It's water resistant to 150 meters, and it has the Omega caliber 8800 self-winding COSC and METAS certified movement with 55 hours of power. It also has a butterfly clasp, which I love, with a comfort setting on it. Now, that comfort setting is really simple. I'll show you it on camera at the moment, but it's really, really simple. And essentially, if you're a little bit too hot, you can expand it that little touch. And if you're colder, when you shrink naturally, you can just close it up. And that's that watch. There's not that much to say about this watch because it's very basic. But I feel like when you have a perfect formula, as I've said in other videos, you don't really need to do that much to perfect something that's already perfected. Because sometimes when you try to perfect something more than that, it just goes wrong. The next watch we're going to talk about, and I know that you guys are going to kill me because you will know this one's coming, but it is the Tudor Black Bay Monochrome. I mean, you can't get a more long-lasting, simple, stripped-down watch that still looks aesthetically damn sexy than the Black Bay Monochrome. I mean, Black Bays on my wrist. They're awesome. This watch comes in at 41 millimeters in diameter and has a 21 millimeter lug width. It also has a case thickness of 13.6 millimeters, but remember within that case thickness, because it is a little bit thicker, is the manufacturer caliber MT5602-U. And this is a self-winding mechanical movement with a bidirectional rotor system, but it has 70 hours of power and it's METAS certified. To get a watch at this price that is METAS certified, I mean, there's no other brands that are doing it. There's no other brands that could do it. There's no other brands that can do it. It's phenomenal. This watch is also waterproof to 200 meters and it has domed sapphire crystal glass and it has the 5-link stainless steel bracelet with polished and satin finish, and it has the T-Fit Tudor clasp. It has all the ruggedness and sportiness of the Black Bay, but it also brings in an element of class to it. And the fact that Tudor are rolling out that COSC and METAS certified movement to all their watches, and it will be all their watches over the next few years, you can't do anything but appreciate that. And appreciate that that'll bring the rest of the industry up. I feel like they're leading the group, they're leading the pack, they are innovating, and they're bringing the rest of the industry up with them. This watch comes in at a touch under £4,000. So again, it definitely isn't cheap, but you cannot find a watch that is METAS certified under £4,000 apart from with Tudor. It just doesn't exist. And that is all from me today. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you did enjoy, please consider hitting that subscribe button or follow our Instagram at Chisholm Hunter Watches or my Instagram at HB Lifelens or our podcast at Into the Mind Podcast. And I'll see you guys real soon.